So this is the end of the day, so thank you for sticking around. Appreciate it. I think we're really going to talk about, research and innovation this afternoon. And that's obviously, given the title of the conference, within the context of, well, how are we going to achieve more affordable medicines? And I think research and innovation is part and parcel of that. We've heard that, throughout the day. And I think what we really want to look at is, what are the key components in research innovation that influence affordable medicines, okay, and impact the price of medicines and the chain of events that leads to the price of medicines. And I'd like, obviously, the opinions of my co-panelists here, but I also would like to make this much more interactive. And please, if you have questions, even in the middle of this, put up your hand. You have a comment or something. Let's make this much more interactive. So first, let's have an introduction by our panelists of who they are and where they come from and what their interests are.
Thank you, Stephen, very much indeed. And thank you very much for inviting me to this event. So my name is Cathy Yelf, and I'm here with three hats on, really. The first is that I'm a trustee of an umbrella organisation called the Association of Medical Research Charities. This is an association of about 140 plus UK charities that collectively put in about £1.6 billion sterling a year into medical research. Most of that comes from a handful of very large charities, but a significant amount, nevertheless, from the remainder charities. And of course, we also, as AMRC, represent a very large millions and millions of patients who have founded, created and supported the charities that now form the AMRC. So that's my first hat. The second hat is that I'm the CEO of a member charity of AMRC, the Macular Society. We're a patient group that supports people with all forms of central vision loss caused by macular degeneration, including inherited retinal diseases, as well as age-related macular degeneration, an absolutely vast and growing public health problem, certainly in the developed world, but increasingly globally. It's now the third biggest cause of sight loss globally, age-related macular degeneration. And my third hat, we also fund biomedical research, of course, as well. And my third hat is as a co-founder of a charity consortium called Action Against Age-Related Macular Degeneration. And Lee Wenhua Lee, who was here a second ago, but he's gone, is the CEO of that organisation. And it is one of these big mission-driven, dreaming collaborations that's trying to find a cure for macular degeneration, or at the very least a way of preventing early-stage macular degeneration from developing and progressing into the blinding forms of the disease. So it is a charity collaboration. As somebody mentioned earlier, charities are very competitive, and charity collaborations are no easier than any other kind of collaboration, let me tell you. But we are making progress. So those are my three hats.
So my name is Rabia. I'm here from Sunsign Health, which, following on from that talk, is a company that has somewhat of a unique business model. So I'd just like to touch upon that quickly. So Sunsign Health is a company that licenses in IP from Oxford, but also has established an incredibly unique business model where we partner with NHS trusts to ethically source anonymized patient data and looking at using clinical AI and machine learning on top of the real-world evidence to derive patient insights. So the reason that this company, so we have access to information like this. We never share the data on with the pharmaceutical companies, but the real differentiator for this company, it is a very unique business model that's been established. And what we have is we have the ability to partner with the NHS. The NHS owns equity within Sunsign Health, and we use our AI applications in conjunction with Pharma. So Pharma will come to us and say, we're looking to identify responders and non-responders for TNF therapy in the real world. So we go back, we identify the cohort. All of the data has to be ethically sourced. It has to go through an ethical review committee agreed upon by the Caldecott Guardian. Once we have access to that anonymized data, we have various machine learning and statistical approaches that we use to answer those questions. And the revenue from that goes back into the NHS. And the vision for this company was one whereby you cannot make money selling into the NHS. We have to use that information and give the value back into the NHS to support the public good. And this is one of those unique business models that's arising bottom up. My role there is heading the AI team and the machine learning team, and I'm a biologist by training.
Hi everyone, my name is Kath Mackay. I'm Director of Aging Society Health and Nutrition at Innovate UK. We're the UK's innovation agency and the prime channel by which government incentivises innovation in business. So as you can imagine, after the last presentation, I've got a tough gig, basically. And I've got to say, in terms of some of the comments made in the last presentation, I don't disagree with them all, I think, actually. But I suppose in terms of where we sit in that ecosystem, we are one of the actors that was described in the last talk. We are part of a body called UK Research and Innovation, which is grant funded by the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And we sit with the Research Councils and Research England, who fund the UK Spine, as part of UKRI. And we are the part of UKRI that incentivises innovation in business. And we're really looking to grow the UK economy by business innovation. So we give out money predominantly by grants, and I can talk about other initiatives if that comes up in conversation. But the idea is that we fund businesses who are highly innovative, they are successful, and then they pay their taxes into the exchequer. So just picking up on some of the themes in the previous talk, we don't have any conditions really. That may change, Yeah, so we are one of the government actors or the public sector actors that the last speaker spoke about. So I lead on everything to do with health and life sciences, and we've got people and initiatives in anything that we think will be of high value for UK PLC. So in this space, we have programmes in drug discovery, digital health, precision medicine, food, primary agriculture, vaccines, and so on and so on. So not quite everything, but everything where we think there is a UK SME base who have got the ability to take UK government money and do something for for social good, but also to make money from it. And I'm not an economist, I'm a stem cell biologist by trade.
Okay, so now that we've done the rounds here, let's start thinking out loud a little bit. Obviously, at the core of the issue we're trying to address today is the issue of affordable medicines, of how do we achieve a system where we get to affordable medicine. Now, obviously, in each case, there are different, you're getting at it from a different perspective. Okay, so it'll be interesting to hear from each one of you how you see that. What do you see as the core bottleneck, okay, from your perspective, to delivering the kind of products that the system needs in order to and so that they can be affordable? Because as we know, obviously, what happens at the research and development stage has a sort of domino effect on everything else. That's apart from the fact that clinical trials and regulation, et cetera, also have an impact on cost, and that's a separate issue, which we can also discuss. But I think and there is innovation, by the way, to be had in that area, in those areas as well. So from your perspective, where do you see the bottlenecks in this continuum that eventually gets us to price? Okay, and where do you think there are ways in which possibly we might be able to get to something that's more affordable and more accessible to a wider range of patients?
Well, I think listening to the debate for the last 2 days, really, it's clear that there are bottlenecks at every stage of the process. There isn't one bottleneck. Everything is contributing to this. Yeah. And it might be the availability of or the short-termism of initial basic research funding. That's clearly a problem. And we contribute to that, I think, as charities, funding short-term projects. We do very little portfolio funding. I think that's clearly a problem. But it goes throughout at every stage. And if there are 100 people, I've spoken to 30 people over the last 2 days, I've had 30 different solutions presented to me.
But you do have a mission.
But we have a mission. We have a mission, and I agree that starting out with a mission is important. And I think one of the things that charities have done, I mean, we do it now, we are largely a response mode funder, and there's been very little demand made on the researchers we fund to come back with something that's actually impactful or return something into the pot. And I think that is changing very considerably.
I mean, let me ask a question regarding that, because I mean, I've had a little bit of experience, with this. To what degree do you find, companies, the big companies, the biotech companies, the pharma companies, open to actually partnering with you, to run, particularly if they have an interest, in a particular disease, partnering with you to actually sort of make 1 + 1 = 3 and get something going? I think that's the first question I would have, regarding that.
I think more than they were, I think is the answer. I think one of the problems is that often we have a different target area than the industry does. So in macular degeneration, for example, a huge amount of the effort is put into late-stage disease, and that's because the endpoints of trials, clinical trials in sight loss, are nearly always visual acuity, and that's where you get to the end stage of the disease when people are losing their sight. We really want them to concentrate on the early stages of the disease before that happens, but we don't have a very good way to design a trial that can do that and find a good endpoint for that trial. So there's a mismatch between the ambition and where the shorter term financial gain is going to be, and that's where we have this mismatch of ambition, really.
And this is where perhaps some public funding, could come in handy in partnership with charities in order to make that happen. And this is one of the criticisms I have because I've done Innovate UK grants, so I know what this is. There is a place for charities within these grants, but the problem you run into is that the time frame within which we have to do these grants doesn't match the decision-making process of the charities. Is there any way that can be changed? Okay, so that in fact the charities might be able to participate because the door's open, right, in a lot of these grants, for the charities to participate in these grants. Is there a way of making that more flexible and perhaps making partnerships with charities and smaller startups and companies?
I think maybe with the very big charities that is easier to do. So clearly Wellcome, CR UK, British Heart Foundation, charities like that are in a position because they come with a lot of money already to start with, so it's much easier. I think this is why we're trying to set up charity collaborations, because when you get down to the next level of charities, there isn't that critical mass really to make that happen, really. So the only way we can do that is by making charities collaborate and cooperate. We can't point the finger at other sectors if we're not doing it ourselves.
Okay, Kath.
And if I could just a couple of those points. But yeah, it's tricky, and I think a lot of what we do is time dependent. You will have a start date, a close date. Some of that is dictated to us by others. We might be kind of having to spend money by a particular time frame, and that dictates what we do, and that isn't ideal. And it's very uncomfortable to have to run those initiatives to time, because we appreciate we're only attracting people with shovel-ready projects who've already got consortia already. So I'm happy to accept all that criticism and the fact it's not ideal. I think what we do aim to do is give groups line of sight of when initiatives are going to go live. So they do, and we do put on events, and we do matchmaking, so make sure that people have got the right partners. So we do try our best to do all of that, but I appreciate it's not ideal. I think if I could talk to some of the charity initiatives, I mean, we are, over the last year, one of the initiatives that I've been most proud of, really, I think, is our work with the charities, recognising, not all charities, but we've got 3 collaborations that we've had in the last year, one with Asthma UK, one with cystic fibrosis, and one with the Celiac Society. And we're really recognising with those collaborations that actually there are new players in the system that we can encourage businesses to be working with that aren't the Innovate UK government usual suspects. So there's 3 projects that we've undertaken where we've provided money directly to charities to run their own competitive processes to support business innovation. And that's been really beneficial for the charities, because they're accessing businesses perhaps for the first time, or different types of businesses. but also it's really good for our companies because they're actually I suppose they have access to patients and how new tools and diagnostics are going to work in practice that they wouldn't necessarily have had if they were partnering with the people they were going to partner with anyway. So I'm hoping that's a piece of work that we can continue as we go through the next couple of financial years, because I think it's really beneficial for our businesses to be working with the third sector in terms of what those relationships can bring in terms of directly access to patients or potentially new markets as well.
So now turning to you, how can we integrate what you do into this process of research and innovation?
Yeah.
How can that be partnered in, to improve significantly, the process and perhaps get faster to the answers that we're looking for that will hopefully lead to more affordable medicines?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear this dichotomy between private and public and charities, because I just view them as stakeholders and not necessarily classifying them one or the other. There's an economic framework. We work under capitalism whereby if you do something faster, you will make more money, and that is what's driving GSK. It's what's driving everyone. I want to get a drug to market faster. That's everyone's motivation. And so if we want to get cheaper drugs to market faster, we have to make everything either cheaper or faster.
I don't know if we want to get them cheaper. We just want to get them better, first of all. Okay, I think that would be the first priority. The second priority would be more affordable than cheaper, I think.
Affordable, yeah, absolutely. But if we can, let's say, if you look at the spend in the pharma industry, a lot of it is going towards phase 3. Right, so is there something we can do today so I spend a lot of my time thinking about how can I make the phase 3 trial either fail faster, because that's a perfectly legitimate thing. Can I make it fail faster? Can I make the phase 2 smaller? Can I make the phase 3 smaller? And we can absolutely do that with real world evidence, because now we have the intersection of genomic technologies, machine learning technology, access to data, and data infrastructure that's come together. That didn't exist 5 years ago, it didn't exist 10 years ago. So we're at a pivotal intersection of biology and technology that would allow us to basically do things that we couldn't do before. That also makes a massive difference where it comes to working with patient groups. Charity or not charity, I think is irrelevant, but the pharma company, as someone that's trying to take a drug to market, I want to know what their problem is, and I want to address that problem by defining the target product profile based on what the patient groups are saying, not what me, bench biologist, thinks.
Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about data and curation and the problems with data. So how do you address that, and how can you ensure yourself that in fact you have the kind of data from which you can extract signals, using machine learning that are valid?
I mean, I think it exists already, and we just have to find, that's the concept behind Sunsign Health is that information exists today in the public sector, and we'd like to access it ethically, of course, consented patients and all of those, to be able to work with the industry that has the ability to take drugs to market as it stands today, the pharmaceutical industry. So we have the machine learning technology, we have the data to do whatever it takes for the pharmaceutical company to try and make that actual process faster, as you had mentioned. And they do want to make it faster, actually. They do want to make it cheaper. They do want the drugs to be cheaper. There is this pharma bashing, which is, they want to make ridiculous returns. But in fact, if I'm an investor and I can invest in GM or Pfizer.
It's not that they do. It's not that they want to. It's that they do make very large returns.
They absolutely do.
It is, yes.
They do, and they're benchmarked on the same platform as if I'm an investor, I can invest in Pfizer or Google, right? And that it's a fundamental bottom up problem, as we heard earlier. But I do think we're at a point now with charity groups that have access to patients and companies like Sensyne Health, where we can change the dynamic and say, actually, the company like Sensyne Health is going to return the money back into the NHS. It's the fundamental view is we will bring drugs to market faster and make money for a public sector.
Okay. Let me just throw in, perhaps Chaz, would you like to?
think just like yesterday I said, I think we need to get rid of the term move to the dark side. I think we also need to get rid of the term pharma bashing. I mean, going back to the earlier presentation, I mean, I remember when I was in Glaxo in the late 80s, early 90s, Glaxo set up a pharmacoeconomics or health economics group, basically to assess the total value to society of a new drug. And at the time, I heard many comments that Pharma was doing this because they were trying to inflate the market size or increase the price of a drug, etc. But today, we're now hearing that in academia, economists are thinking about public value. It's exactly the same thing. And I said at the start of the day, I think, we need to stop pointing the finger at each other. We recognize that this is such a tough game. We just need to come together. And if we combine our infrastructures and our expertise and our resources, I think we can increase the probability of success. But anyway, that's a bit of a sidebar. But I just wanted to say, I think the three panelists we've got here, Stephen, I mean, I love the way the patient groups have come together. Rabia, I love the way Sensyne is, if you like, being an intermediary between the NHS and the pharmaceutical industry. And the NHS is probably our biggest USP. I think what Innovate has done, it's a start, but I think it's great, trying to help translate more sort of academic ideas, help them to commercialize, help them to create impact, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the one thing I would love to see happen in this country over the past several years, and Cath, you know more about this than I do, is you've set up these catapults. Now, the catapults were set up to create new industries in a particular area. Now, if we all believe that patient data is the new oil, I think we need to set up a catapult inside the NHS, because we appreciate that there are many challenges inside the NHS in terms of innovation and translation, et cetera, et cetera. So let's set up a catapult inside the NHS to sort out those problems.
I think there'd be a lot of patient support for that, because patients, of which, of course, we are the patients. So perhaps accepting the people in this room, patients by and large are baffled by this problem. They're baffled about why drugs take so long to come, why there is still no treatment for dry AMD, why some of these drugs are so expensive that NICE won't let them through the system, and patients then are marching in the streets over this. They are baffled by the whole thing. And I think they're also baffled by the lack of cooperation between sectors, the competition between charities, and also the wastage in the system. And I think if patients understood the value to the research community of patient data, they would be livid that it's not being used better than it is.
I think there won't be a catapult in health data, but I think we're working on it, I think. So in terms of what the catapults are, for those of you that aren't aware, they are Innovate UK core-funded technology and innovation centres, and in the health space we have three. So we have Medicines Discovery Catapult up in Audley Park. They're not really creating, I suppose, new industries, but looking at the barriers to industry and what the blockers are and addressing those. So we've got Medicines Discovery up in Cheshire, Cell and Gene Therapy here in London, and we also have the Centre for Process Innovation up in Darlington, which is part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. Whether there are more or less catapults, a lot of that is out of our control. A lot of it's kind of quite ministerial and policy, orientated. They go in and out of fashion, a bit like flares come back every now and again. I think what we are doing in the health data space is we've got various. We are delivering challenges. They are very much government mission led. I think in response to the last presentation. So. We're delivering what's called the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, and it's a UKRI-wide initiative, so it's Innovate UK delivered, but very much working with the councils. So it's business focused, but it brings in government, the councils, to address these challenges. There is one which is it's a £210 million challenge to use data for precision medicine applications. And part of that is the creation of a network of digital informatics hubs, which is being led by Health Data Research UK. So that is something that's ongoing at the moment, and there will be, I understand that will be competed out, and there'll be an opportunity to set up these informatics hubs around the UK, working very closely with Health Data Research UK. And that very much is going to be working out how we do get pharma companies and biotech companies to access and benefit from patient data. And with that, there absolutely has got to be an engagement exercise, really, because we can't do it without public understanding and buy-in for why it's being done. So there won't be a catapult,
and properly thought through safeguards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's what government has got to really clarify that.
But what about the reverse? Okay, what about the data troves that the pharma companies have? Okay, that could be useful in this exercise as well, particularly if amalgamated with the clinical data, which is available, from the NHS. Has there been any discussion around, reciprocity in terms of them being able to provide, anonymized, data to the mix?
Yeah, separate to that, there has been. I know that's something that Medicines Discovery Catapult are leading on as well. So there are data-based applications that we're exploring for drug discovery as well, and not us directly, but through Medicines Discovery in Cheshire. And I know that there are other kind of UK businesses that are doing that independently as well, who've got their own collaboration. So potentially it could link in, but there are separate initiatives being discussed across government about using pharma data for drug discovery purposes.
Up there.
On the NHS and the idea of a catapult within the NHS, I agree that would be difficult, but what can work well is bringing the NHS in as partners on Innovate Challenge funds, Innovate calls, and having worked within the Advanced Therapy Treatment Centre network, the NHS were the lead for each of those centres with collaborators in from industry. And that was something that was somewhat new to the NHS organisations leading those, and it was a steep learning curve working with the SMEs and with the bigger companies with a goal to deliver, a standard of care for cell and gene therapy, rolling it out. And I think more of those sorts of ones where you put the NHS in the centre of the challenge actually start to see a shared vision and actually see deliverables. So it's kind of, you put the bomb into the NHS and you get them to work outwards. And, I think even in the time that I was on the project for about a year, we went through a steep learning curve, the forming, storming, norming, and more of those will start to see us work better with the NHS, and maybe part of that is to address the data issue as well.
I think, as part, one of the beauty, I suppose, of delivering initiatives through UK research and innovation, not just through Innovate UK, is that businesses don't always have to lead, and there have been initiatives where it's been actually more appropriate for the NHS or a public sector body to lead, which it hasn't gone down well with business. But the driver for that is that if you're going to create system change and tackle issues such as interoperability, then having one business lead to do that may not always be the right thing to do. So through delivering kind of UKRI-wide initiatives, we have more flexibility, and we have allowed NHS to be right at the front and centre of some of the initiatives that we've been delivering.
Hi, so we've heard a few times today the issue of trust coming up. And a few years ago, we had the fiasco with care.data, where we're talking about using patient data to support drug discovery, and any kind of access to this data is potentially an issue for the public. So how do you propose going about building trust in a manner which will hopefully build public support for this kind of activity and allow us to build new markets within the UK that leverage this unique opportunity that we have within the NHS?
One of the ways that the government is hoping is that the charities are going to sell in this idea to the on the basis that charities command more trust than governments. And of course, that's something that we're very happy to do, provided that we trust that those safeguards are in place. So I think that conversation is still going on about how that is done. But I think medical research charities see this as an important area that we can influence the patient groups, provided all those other safeguards are in place. If we can be happy, then we'll be happy to sell it on, basically.
Regulations are clearly important, but I mean, are any of you working with social scientists, for instance, to come up with strategies and tactics that will really get to the root of some of these trust issues?
We're starting to. It's a work in progress, I would say. So we're working closely with ESRC on some of those challenges. We've got, there was a challenge recently announced, but not really come up and running yet. It's called Accelerating Detection of Disease, and it's looking to build a cohort of 5 million patients for testing for the diagnostics industry. And we're working closely with ESRC on those how are we going to build this cohort of patients from scratch? And we need a lot of help with that, because we can't go out as UK government and do that alone. I think we need to understand what the challenges are. So we are starting to talk UKI-wide about delivering that. But it's tricky. I think we're at the start of something. I think it's fair to say. We haven't worked it all out yet, but we absolutely do need patient engagement. And actually, a lot of the time, patients do want to engage, and they do understand, actually. And if they do want to be able to, they want their data used, actually. So there are, anecdotally, we do hear that patients actually want to get involved, but don't understand how they can be. So there's another challenge there that we need to get around as well.
Yeah, we did a little piece of work with some of our patients recently about obtaining retrospective permission to use eye scans, CT scans of the back of the eye, for an AI project. And actually, overwhelmingly, people were in favour of those anonymised scans being made available for further research on a kind of opt-out basis, rather than an absolutely patient-by-patient retrospective permissions being sought. So people do understand these issues. Then, properly explain to them, they do understand them. Yeah. But we do have to have that trust between all the links in the chain.
Yeah.
Just
Malcolm.
To your point about making data available, we've mentioned already a couple of times the All Trials database.
Yeah.
Academics don't put their stuff into All Trials.
Same thing. Absolutely.
So,
I agree.
What's good for the goose? I would have thought the best way of absolutely driving behaviour is what I always do when I see something externally that I think would be of value to my company. I always tell my organisation that AstraZeneca and Pfizer are all over it like a rash, just to get the attention of the senior people to at least read the two-pager. I think that it doesn't matter if it's Sunsign Health or whether it's an Innovate UK academic, small company-driven project, if you actually look for a quick win where there's an example where you've made the trial so much smaller, or you've actually driven a pathway in some description, and you tell everyone about it. Yeah. We'll publicise it, because then what happens is people want a slice of the cake. And over the years, I've done that with different technologies. People think they're missing out and they want to come in. That's the way I would go about it, rather than another funding mechanism. Innovate UK, I've got a good name out there. There's not many universities I don't go to where there's at least a couple of good news examples of where they've done good stuff. You can easily do it in the data space.
Thank you.
Speed to market has been portrayed as an absolute mission and the win, and I would completely agree with you if we were talking about really transformative products which change human health and bring benefits. But unfortunately, the system is massively exploited, and because of the speed, we get a great asymmetry here, and EMA and FDA accelerated their approvals, and I would be delighted to hear if you could give me an example which of these drugs which were launched early were more affordable. If anything, they become absolutely unaffordable. And unfortunately, they come to market with very poor quality evidence. And we have examples such as Latruvo, which was approved by all the agencies. NICE puts it in Cancer Drugs Fund. The drug doesn't work. So NICE stops it. Eli Lilly makes $2 billion on that drug. it's not better than the chemotherapy that we had 40 years ago. That money, of course, doesn't go to patient or to the payers or anywhere. They sit with Eli Lilly. Same thing with nivolumab for small cell lung cancer. Same thing with bevacizumab with metastatic breast cancer. Examples are countless, but the point is these are extreme examples, but we have tons of examples of drugs which are just simply mediocre, completely mediocre at incredible prices. But the biggest problem is in clinical practice, we don't know how to use these drugs because evidence is never generated. And we start relying on real-world evidence, which is actually big question. Is it useful? What is it useful for? It's completely a fantastic solution for detection of long-term adverse events, which you cannot establish in trials. Now we are pushing to try to use real-world evidence for establishing efficacy. This is a massively flawed route forward because we will be getting more and more products onto the market which do not work. They do not bring benefit. We will be saving absolutely on the drug development part, but we will not be saving on human lives. And this is a very important problem that we need to address.
I wanted to actually, it's a very good point. Do you want to answer that specifically? Yeah.
I mean, I think those are really valid concerns and points. And I think that's exactly the type of questions we need to be asking, right? So the ability, so just looking at Sunsign Health, the company IPO'd in August last year. It's a very young company. It's a very new business model. And I think we work very closely with clinicians, actually. So every one of our programs is clinician-led. So we're running, let's say, an asthma program. I go and sit down with the clinician and say, what are your fundamental problems? How can we help you? How can we use the data that we have access to help you? And then we actually work with charities to do something very similar, because the fundamental point is patient benefit. So if Pfizer, for example, because we've picked the name today, were able to get a drug faster to market phase 2 or phase 3 because of some analysis we've done, we won't make money off that any faster because they did that. So our motivations, because we sit in the middle, are actually driven by patient benefit. We're not driven by, let's get that drug to market faster. All we're doing is we're enabling the ability to ask the question. And truly, I don't know whether anyone can answer factually that real-world evidence is going to solve all of the problems. I think we're starting to be able to ask that question. What we're very quickly coming to is real-world evidence without the molecular biology is kind of challenging. It'll only take you so far. And now most people are saying, well, if you don't have the genotype linked to the phenotype, it's not that exciting anymore. And so now there's a secondary question is, how do you anonymize genotype linked to phenotype? And we have to start asking those questions, asking the ethical questions, which no one has the answer for right now. But if we don't have the conversation with all of the stakeholders, including Big Pharma on the table, I feel like we'll keep going around in circles. We need to bring everyone together and say, Pharma is the one that's building this industry right now, whether we like it or not, and we have to not have them lead the conversation. The clinicians need to be there, the charities need to be there, and we just need to try and work together. I know it doesn't answer your question. I don't have an answer, unfortunately.
And I'm probably not the best person to answer that either, really. But what I can say is that there's an increasing recognition for the need for publicly available schemes to gather real-world evidence. So we are delivering initiatives on behalf of the Office for Life Science, which is an output of the Accelerated Access Review, where we have funding available for businesses who need to look for and gather real-world evidence. And I suppose historically we were constrained actually from doing so because it wasn't actually deemed to be innovative, just gathering evidence. So we were actually very limited by being able to offer schemes that allowed businesses to generate evidence because it just wasn't innovative. But I think there's a recognition across government that needs to happen, and we've delivered initiatives on behalf of OLS, and I know that NIHR, through their I4I scheme, are starting to look into that too. So I think I could just recognise it. I think it's absolutely critical, and we need to find mechanisms to allow that to happen.
I think one more question from Chaz, and then we'll have to close down.
You know, for the past probably 15 years, we've used the term clinician scientist. How many clinician entrepreneurs do we have in the UK?
Very good question.
I know of 2. One was sitting next to me.
There are a few. I think there are a few, but you're right, there aren't many.
And going back to the NHS Catapult, maybe that's a wrong terminology. You know, I could imagine if you created an organization inside the NHS and said, right, your job is in the next 5 years to create 20 companies to address patient problems inside the NHS and bring in 20 clinical studies with big pharma into the NHS in the next 5 years, I think that would be transformative.
But I don't think we need a catapult to do that, and I just don't know if that's the right
whatever.
And I think through some of those industrial strategy initiatives, I think that will happen. I mean, I think we don't have a target for creating companies. I think we just need to get to the solutions that address these big problems while giving companies an opportunity to grow and scale. I think some of that is happening through the industrial strategy and initiatives through Health Data Research UK.
Well, on that note, I want to thank my panelists for their words of wisdom and profundity. I think we've covered a wide range of subjects. Great questions from the audience. Thank you very much for still being here this late, and thank you to you all.